Behold, the beating heart of global commerce, where towering giants of steel traverse vast oceans, connecting nations, cultures, and economies. This is the world of shipping, the unsung hero of global trade. Throughout history, shipping has been the lifeline of civilizations, facilitating trade, cultural exchanges, and economic prosperity. From the Phoenician traders to the exploratory voyages of the Age of Discovery, each wave of maritime innovation brought the world closer, weaving a complex tapestry of global interconnectivity. In the early 19th century, steam power revolutionized maritime trade, shrinking distances and expanding horizons as it decreased the reliance on wind and manpower. Later, the introduction of the diesel engine in the early 20th century transformed the maritime industry yet again, making shipping faster, more efficient, and economically viable on a larger scale. Today, the shipping industry remains the linchpin of global commerce. Massive ships navigate the globe, carrying everything from food and raw materials to finished goods.
Today, the commercial shipping industry has grown to a staggering $14 trillion, or the GDP of Japan, Germany, India, and the UK combined, and it is responsible for the transport of over 80% of goods worldwide. Now, that equates to the equivalent of around 1.5 tons of goods per person per year. As our population continues to expand and as consumer demand continues to grow, these numbers are set to rise even further, with the International Chamber of Shipping predicting that world seaborne trade will surpass the transport of 16 billion tons of goods by 2030.
Our modern world heavily depends on the seamless operation of this intricate network of maritime trade. The International Maritime Organization, or IMO, is the United Nations agency that sets standards for the safety, security, and environmental performance of international shipping. Since its founding in 1948, the IMO has overseen the shipping industry's adoption of new technologies and practices in response to an ever-changing world.
The maritime industry is a crucial part of the global supply chain, and millions of people rely on it. Recent geopolitical events have brought into sharp focus the importance of international shipping, whether it concerns the shortage of grain in developing countries or more mundane things like shortage of consumer goods, particularly in countries that depend heavily on imports. Without shipping, half of the world would starve and the other half would freeze.
The shipping industry's extensive history and vast logistics network is an incredible testament to human ingenuity and coordination. But as we steer our course forward, we must also navigate the challenges the industry poses to the environment. The shipping industry is responsible for about 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Annually, it's estimated that maritime transport emits around 940 million tons of CO2, contributing not only to global warming, but also to ocean acidification. As awareness of the industry's environmental impact grows, so does the urgency for change.
While shipping is the most efficient mode of transport, we are now presented with one of the biggest challenges that the maritime sector has ever faced, and that's the global decarbonization of shipping.
The International Maritime Organization introduced several measures to curtail the shipping industry's greenhouse gas emissions, with the ambition of reaching net zero by 2050. Key developments include the Greenhouse Gas Strategy, that targets a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships and works towards phasing them out entirely. This strategy includes short-term, mid-term, and long-term measures, pushing the industry towards innovation and the adoption of cleaner energy sources.
The shipping industry is responding to these significant regulatory developments, with innovations in ship design and propulsion systems, as well as increased interest in alternative fuels. The focus is not only on compliance, but also on leading the global shift towards more sustainable practices.
The single biggest challenge we are facing is the fight against climate change and global warming, and shipping stands ready to play its part in reaching the goals set by the Paris Agreement in this regard. The call for action is a global one, and shipping must take its share of responsibility. The effect this will have on technological developments cannot be overestimated. Apart from the technological challenges, we must ensure that this ambitious transition is just and equitable by supporting developing countries and leaving no one behind, conscious of the differences in the levels of budget, technology, and needs among the IMO member states. And let's not forget the human element in all these developments. The world depends on safe, secure, and efficient shipping, and shipping depends on an adequate supply of seafarers to operate the ships that carry the essential cargoes we all rely on.
Overcoming these challenges requires concerted efforts from industry, governments, and international bodies, and most importantly, viable, sustainable fuel solutions.
To realize the ambitious goals of the strategy, significant numbers of zero-carbon ships or ships that can easily be adopted to low or zero-carbon fuels will have to enter the fleet by 2030. The Maritime Safety Committee of IMO plays its own role in these developments. The successful delivery of the agreed greenhouse gas emission reduction policy undoubtedly requires the assessment of the associated safety risks for ships and for the people that operate them, and also the surrounding infrastructure. The delivery of necessary accompanying international requirements is essential in this regard.
There are several types of marine fuel technologies that are currently gaining traction.
So what are the options? Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, is currently the most established alternative to the traditional marine fuels, and it can offer an immediate reduction in CO2, sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter. However, its ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is heavily dependent on preventing methane slip during its engine operation and throughout the supply chain, while it will also continue to release some CO2 during combustion. Now, the infrastructure for LNG is rapidly expanding, but it still remains less available compared to traditional fuels. Now, one widely discussed alternative, green hydrogen, and that is hydrogen produced via electrolysis using renewable energy, does offer a zero-emission solution. However, it will continue to be plagued by challenges, including its low energy density, the massive requirement of green electricity to produce, and the need for an entirely new fuel infrastructure. Ammonia, a hydrogen carrier, does actually have a higher energy density than hydrogen. When burned, it does not emit CO2, but it does produce nitrogen oxide, a strong pollutant in itself. Additionally, the production of ammonia from green hydrogen is essential for it to be a sustainable option, meaning ammonia inherits a lot of the scalability and cost issues of green hydrogen. Another hydrogen carrier, methanol, is a fuel that can reduce nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and particulate matter emissions, but does still emit some CO2. Additionally, its energy density is again lower than traditional fuels, meaning it will require more frequent refueling or much larger storage tanks. Another option, biofuels, those produced from organic materials, can be used in ships either in pure form or blended with conventional marine fuels. And while they can significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there are continued concerns around their feedstock availability, the competition with food production, and the impacts on biodiversity.
Despite the available options, there remain several challenges to the widespread adoption of low to zero emission fuel technologies.
Proactive action from industry is needed, and the maritime sector is currently witnessing a number of pilot projects using alternative fuels, adapting technological solutions, or installing completely new technologies. More first movers are needed to showcase the technical viability of the proposed measures. The cost and availability at scale of alternative fuels and propulsion plays a big role in this regard. Candidate future low-carbon and zero-carbon fuels have very diverse production pathways. Different generations of biofuels and hydrogen-based fuels entail significant differences in their overall environmental footprint.
The shipping industry transition to a sustainable future will likely be multifaceted, involving a combination of the options we've discussed, tailoring to different ship types and operational requirements. However, all of these options are in some way likely to increase transportation and consumer costs.
While cutting emissions is paramount, the shipping industry needs a path towards decarbonization that will enhance, not curb, its operational efficiencies.
It boils down to energy density. Our intermediate fuel oils, bunker fuel, contain about 40 megajoules per kilo, giving us about 11 megawatt hours per ton of fuel. LNG is a little better, but the so-called green alternatives, ammonia, methanol, contain less than half the energy of bunker fuel. That means more waste and more emissions and less energy.
In the face of unprecedented demand and stringent emissions regulations, the maritime industry stands on the cusp of another revolutionary shift. The latest generation of nuclear technologies promises a sea change in maritime economics.
New nuclear energy, distinctly different from conventional old nuclear in our energy transition efforts, is seeing a fast building momentum in our industry. The ICS Barometer Survey of 2023 saw about 10% of senior maritime executives seeing new nuclear energy being launched for maritime within the next decade, and new nuclear is now a central feature at most shipping industry conferences. Shipping companies representing over 4,000 ships have to date made investments in new nuclear technology development tailored specifically for maritime.
Nuclear-powered vessels offer an opportunity to overhaul global maritime logistics.
New nuclear is the only true zero-emission energy for the lifetime of ships. No other energy source or power system gives us true zero-emission footprint. Going to zero emissions does not mean switching to another exhaust form or trying to catch the air pollution we cause in filters so we can bury it elsewhere. It means not emitting, and only nuclear can do that. Every Cape-size bulker powered by new nuclear will prevent 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide from being emitted in dry cargo transportation. And you multiply that up in the fleet and the impact is substantial.
Fueled for life, these ships offer stability to an industry battered by fuel price and demand volatility.
New nuclear technologies run on very long fuel cycles. Standard, natural, commercial-grade uranium can give us 22 million megawatt hours per ton of fuel. That's 4 million times more than ammonia and methanol. So a Cape-size bulker, the one we spoke about before, operating for 30 years on new nuclear power, would generate about 650 kilos of waste in metallic form over a lifetime, which can be recycled or stored.
With the ability to cruise at high speeds without emitting any greenhouse gases, they promise faster delivery times without additional fuel costs, thereby slashing operational costs and boosting global trade efficiency.
Taking into account the excellent safety record of currently operating nuclear-powered ships, albeit not that many and mainly operating under military conditions, and also taking into effect that they are not emitting any greenhouse gas emissions, there can be no doubt that the renewed attention will be given to this form of propulsion.
The intertwined path of the nuclear and maritime industries is one of unparalleled economic and environmental promise. As we navigate towards a zero-emissions future, new nuclear stands as a beacon of innovation, offering a viable and transformative energy solution for the maritime industry.
If we are serious about going to zero, nuclear, and new nuclear in particular, is essential. It simply will not happen without it. It's a clean, safe, sustainable, and disruptive solution. We need to think differently because the future cannot look the same as it does today. Piece by piece, we must build the confidence of markets, governments, and customers that a new nuclear solution is in fact the end game of our energy transition.
Together, the shipping and nuclear industries can chart a sustainable course for the entire world.